You know, if you've ever spent some time reading the Old Testament, you've probably run into this one nagging question. Why did the ancient Israelites keep turning away from God? I mean, after everything they saw, everything they went through, they just keep worshiping idols. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But what if it wasn't about them being foolish? What if it was about temptations that are, well, a lot more familiar than we think? Let's dig in.
It is so easy for us to sit back from our 21st century perspective and ask that question. We know how the story ends, we know all the consequences, and we think to ourselves, oh, I would never have done that. It's a totally normal reaction, but it kind of misses the deeper, more human story that was really going on.
So let's try to flip the script here. Instead of asking how dumb they were, what if we ask what their motivation was? What if the magnetic pull toward these other gods had nothing to do with intelligence and everything to do with some very powerful, very real payoffs?
And that's exactly the approach we're going to take. We're going to move past the judgment and just get into the investigation. What exactly were the incredible rewards the Israelites saw when they looked at the Canaanite religions all around them?
Because when you start to break it down, you realize the allure wasn't random at all. It actually revolved around three core temptations that are, frankly, timeless. We're going to take a look at each one.
So let's just start with the first and maybe the most primal incentive of them all, sex. You see, the Canaanite religious system didn't just kind of look the other way. It literally built sex right into its worship practices.
And the Bible is surprisingly direct about this whole thing. You take a story like in Numbers 25, where the Israelite men get involved with Moabite women, and the very next thing they do is start sacrificing to the Moabite gods. The two acts were totally linked. And later, the law in Deuteronomy specifically forbids something it calls cult prostitutes, which tells you this wasn't just random behavior, it was an organized religious thing.
The language itself gives us this massive clue. The original Hebrew has two different words. There's zona, which is just a standard garden variety prostitute, but then there's this other word, kadesha, and this is wild. It comes from the word kadosh, which means holy. So what you have are holy women, religiously sanctioned prostitutes who are part of a shrine.
So you see what's happening here? This wasn't just seen as debauchery. It was actually framed as a legitimate, even sacred, part of their religion. The whole idea was that these ritual acts would please the fertility gods. You know, Baal, the storm god, Asherah, the mother goddess, and they'd send rain, make your crops grow, and make your family bigger. It was a powerful, built-in reward.
Okay, so that was a pretty powerful pull, but it didn't stop there. Let's move on to the second major incentive, which was the promise of wealth and just plain old materialism.
I mean, you really have to try and put yourself in their shoes. The Israelites had just come out of 40 years of wandering in the desert. They were ex-slaves, and they had next to nothing. And they walk into this land where the Canaanites have these big, walled cities, established farms, beautiful homes, infrastructure. The contrast between the two groups was just night and day.
The book of Deuteronomy even spells it out. It talks about them coming into a land with great and good cities you did not build, houses full of all good things you did not fill. It was basically a turnkey civilization. The Canaanites had all the stuff the Israelites could ever want.
So this created an incredibly simple and incredibly effective sales pitch. The Canaanites could just point to everything they had and say, look, this is what our gods like Baal do for us. We're rich, you're poor. You worship our gods and you can get all this stuff too. It's a really compelling argument because it's based on results you can literally see and touch.
All right, so we've got sex and money. This third incentive, though, this might be the most relatable one for us today. It's that deep human need to just fit in. Plain and simple, peer pressure.
See, Israel was the weird kid on the block. They were culturally and religiously unique. It's why they eventually demanded a king, right? They said they wanted to be like all the nations. And think about their worship. Their God was invisible. All their neighbors had these impressive, tangible statues and idols they could look at and touch. The Israelites had an empty space above a wooden box. You can just feel the constant pressure to be a little more normal.
Now, for the longest time, we only saw this peer pressure through the eyes of the biblical prophets who were condemning it. But then, in the 1970s, archaeologists made this absolutely breathtaking discovery out in the Sinai Desert that gave us a direct, first-hand look. At a site called Quintilit Ajrud, they found an old Israelite settlement. And the crucial part is they dated it to the 8th century BC. We're talking smack dab in the middle of Israel's history as a kingdom. This is the exact time when prophets like Isaiah were active. It was the perfect time capsule.
So inside, what looked like a shrine, They found these pieces of broken pottery. And on one of those pieces, there was a drawing and an inscription that completely changed how we understand what was actually happening on the ground back then.
And this is it. The inscription, written in ancient Hebrew, reads, "I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and by his Asherah." Just let that sink in for a second. His Asherah. This is an absolute bombshell. It's an Israelite, explicitly pairing Yahweh, the God of Israel, with Asherah, a famous Canaanite goddess, as his wife.
This is a perfect example of what scholars call syncretism. It's when you blend different, even contradictory religious beliefs. The people at this site would have told you, oh yeah, of course we worship Yahweh. But what they had done was make him more user-friendly, more palatable to the culture around them by giving him a wife in a physical form, just like all their neighbors' gods.
So when you put all of this together, you start to see that Israel's constant turning away wasn't really a story about foolishness. It was a deeply human story about temptation.
So the pull away from their unique faith, it wasn't random. It was powered by this perfect storm of incentives. A religion that gave a green light to physical pleasure, the undeniable promise of material wealth, and that overwhelming social pressure to just fit in.
And this is exactly why this ancient story still hits so hard today. These weren't just the problems of some faraway, bygone era. They are fundamental human struggles that really don't change all that much over time. Which leads us to the final question, really. When you look at our own world, with all its constant pressures around sex, money, and social conformity, you have to ask, 3,000 years later, have our core temptations really changed at all?